As the first grandchild, you're going to be spoiled. It's really not your fault, but you make matters worse by having utterly captivating deep blue eyes. They were the first thing I saw the day that Joshua burst onto the world scene 2 hours and 35 minutes late for my birthday. His eyes looked around the room as if to say, "Okay, what's next?" When he looked at me for the first time, I realized that he was already going to live up to the name he was given. We chose his name deliberately, the plan of naive parents who saw how names shaped the lives of those great characters of the Bible. And we had been to Bible school. He was coming to join us in Pittsburgh on our biggest adventure, planting a new church. We imagined as we held him that somehow, like Joshua of the Scripture, he might conquer some new territory, press on into some unknown adventure. Like the Scripture said, be strong and courageous. Don't be terrified. Don't be discouraged, for the Lord your God will go with you wherever you go. Be careful what you name your children. They might live up to it in ways you can never imagine. We named him Aaron for his middle name. It was more like a hope, a prayer that he might be able to speak up for people who couldn't speak up for themselves. You know, kind of like Moses' brother Aaron did. Be careful what you name your children. As a little boy, Joshua's endless curiosity about how things worked was only surpassed by his endless energy. I got him a little set of kids' tools that's turned out to be a big mistake as he took things apart, everything apart, to see how it worked. I came to dislike the word why as the endless stream flowed from his lips. My favorite answer, of course, go ask Mommy. We were glad to have a large family, to have the first grandchild, and lots of people who wanted to share the joy. We freely and often did so that we could rest. You should know that the first word Josh spoke was not the word why. No, it was the word damn. It's a word that refers not to those structures of mud and branches made by those lovable furry builders in nature, but rather it was part of a sentence structure that you might hear behind some knothead in rush hour traffic. I will let you know he didn't learn it from me. I suppose right then and there we might have known that he would be no ordinary child. Josh jumped into preschool without a whimper and never looked back, much to the sorrow of his mother and the joy of his exhausted dad. From the first day, he began a long history of breaking the hearts of little girls with those teardrop eyes and his always entertaining antics. His teachers loved him, but they could never get him to sit still. His attention was short, his energy was expansive. The reports began to flow in. If Josh would just apply himself to his studies the way he applies himself to his social life, he would get straight A's. If I had a nickel for every time I heard those words over the next 12 years, Josh would never have had to worry about his school debt. He began to fall behind very early in school, with his ability to focus on reading and writing tasks being very difficult. His ability to recall complex facts and tasks and understand the way things worked astounded us and confused us. A little boy that would ask, "Dad, what's beyond infinity? Does God live there?" Certainly this child could not be having problems in school. He was smart, he was outgoing, but it was becoming clear that he couldn't fit into the structure of the school we had sent him to, Eden Christian Academy. They loved him, but they could never handle him. The professionals told us he had attention deficit disorder, ADD. Perhaps a catch-all diagnosis for kids that maybe just don't fit in, but in any case, that diagnosis brought resources and it brought challenges we'd never faced before. When people describe your child as different, it's the first of many D words that you come to dislike, like disability and disorder and deficit. No kid really wants to be different, and no parent wants the attention that comes with being different. Frustration and anger began to build in Joshua because he kept being told he was different. He could learn by listening in ways other people could not even imagine. But you know, schools tend to focus on reading and writing and not hearing and remembering. He was different. And even as a child, he began to look at the world in a view that other people seldom saw or took the time to see. We try to help those who are different by telling them they're special. We give them special classrooms and special teachers and special education. But no one really wants to be special. Children and parents and adults in general can often be incredibly cruel to those who are different. Kids who are different are sometimes taunted and isolated and embarrassed and made the butt end of jokes and pranks. That pain and that anger and that frustration molds and forms a person's life, or it shatters it. Kids handle it differently, as do parents. Kids withdraw, they act up, they act out, and they overcompensate. Josh couldn't decide, so he did them all. If I had a nickel for every time Josh was sent to the principal's office or one of his teachers called us about him, he would never have had to worry about his school debts. Josh got into fights, a lot of them. He once told the principal of the school she was demon-possessed, which made for a very interesting conversation about my theological views. He became the class clown, the chief prankster, and the organizer of dozens and dozens of events of dubious value. Even in grade school, his teachers were amazed at his complexity in the social skills area and his ability to gather along the innocent for organized mischief. The tears and the conflict of those days were made bearable because of a team of loving and caring people. People who invested themselves in Josh and in us. Teachers and teachers' aides and tutors and doctors and programs and universities and prayer warriors and babysitters and huggers and listeners and advocates and Sunday school teachers and friends and youth pastors in church. People brought what they had, and we began to see a change happen in Joshua. We made a very reasoned and difficult decision at that time to refuse the quick fix of medications and opt for the less traveled road of discipline, consistency, hard-fought progress, and lots and lots and lots of tears. It was a joint effort. It was exhausting. It was a battle plan with fresh reinforcements, and we always needed them. When Josh was a little boy, the experts talked about how his brain would rewire itself if we just kept working at it. And it did in every way except for the spelling part. That, unfortunately, he inherited from me, and so we didn't work on it very much. He excelled. He pursued. He grew, and our despair turned into cautious hope. He was making progress, and he refused to ever accept the label that he had ADD. In reality, labels really matter very little because we are amazed at who he was becoming. Somewhere along the line, he began to agree that God had made him different, not to frustrate him, but to give him a gift. In February of 1996, at age 15, Josh, my mother, and my cousin Michelle joined me and a group of us on a missions trip to the Dominican Republic. If you ever have the opportunity to take your kids on a missions trip, do so. It's cheaper than either bail or attorney fees. And for some of them, like Joshua, it will change their lives and their view of the world. He saw people for the first time who had little earthly possessions, but were filled with passion for God. While in the Dominican Republic, after working a previous day in 100-plus degree heat on the top of a roof of a church, Josh got very sick. He was feverish, he was vomiting, and I had to leave him the next morning to go to the job site because I was the only one that could drive the van in the Dominican Republic. Our Dominican host, the mother of 2 children who couldn't speak English, insisted that she would be his mother and that I must go. Little did I know she would call the women of the church together